So dealing with stress, there's all different kinds of things that can happen with stress. I talked about the inflammation, but even people getting cancer, I say it a lot that patients who come in, like one woman was in yesterday, and she's been recovering from breast cancer. And she said, I really don't have a lot of stress. And I said, you've had stress for years, and that can be what causes the body to start multiplying the breast cancer and causing it to come to fruition. Stress and weight around the belly, people see that a lot, and they'll say, I can feel, that stress. Decreasing natural killer cells, that's actually our immune system. So when we're high in stress, we're going to have a higher risk of our immune system being off kilter or not as supportive to us. Telomeres are from our DNA, and the longer our telomeres are, then the healthier we age. So stress can actually decrease those telomeres, and it would decrease our length of old age or growing old. And then stress causes leaky gut. And a lot of people have heard that term, leaky gut. Some people will say, I'm gluten intolerant, but the stress can actually be the reason you're gluten intolerant instead of the gluten being the reason that you have the gut issues. So it can go both ways. Next. So here, I just put in a bunch of different slides intermittently that hopefully when you get the PowerPoint just extra and you can keep it, you'll have these different slides that just talk about being able to overcome the stressors or to diminish a little bit of the stress. Smiling. I was on the phone today and trying to leave a message, and the mom had a little kid talking on the phone, and at the very end the mom kept saying, do this, or say this, and at the end she said, say I love you, and the little child said, I love you, mwah! And obviously she hadn't been told to do that, but it just made my heart smile. So I think smiling and laughing and being grateful are good ways to decrease our stress on a daily basis. Next. So sleep. Sleep is one of those things that is so important, and people don't realize that it can actually cause all these different issues. So weight gain actually is not even on here, but if you don't sleep well, then you can have trouble losing weight, or you will gain weight. Headaches, all different kinds of things that go along with sleep. So prioritizing sleep is important. And I know that's not always easy, but if you can, when my kids were baby little, I used to get told, you need to sleep whenever the babies are sleeping or the kids sleep. And I used to sit on the phone and do work when they were sleeping. So I didn't appreciate that need for sleep at the time. But if you lose sleep, it can increase your hunger hormones and increase your appetite. So that's another way that we gain weight when we don't sleep well. So on the sleep hygiene, if you just absolutely can't sleep, I've given you some tips here of different things to try. Most people know about melatonin, and melatonin's even been helpful during COVID for decreasing inflammation. But some of the other ones you might not be aware of. The next one's called Phosphatidylserine, and it can actually lower your cortisol level. And so it decreases your stress and can help you sleep. And it can be taken during the day or night. L-theanine is an amino acid, and it helps calming. I call it my natural Xanax or natural Valium. So it's not addictive, but it can just take off the edge and make people feel less stressed. Magnesium, a lot of people know of magnesium when it comes to magnesium being a laxative, but it's also a muscle relaxer, and it's a sleep aid, and it's an antidepressant and an anti-anxiety medication. So magnesium has huge benefits when it comes to relaxing at night. Some people will do Epsom salt baths, and that is a form of magnesium. So the warm, relaxing hot bath can help you sleep. And then omega-3s. Omega-3s help to kind of calm down the brain and put out the fire in the brain. And so that can be relaxing and calming also. Next slide. This slide is about insulin resistance, which has to do with that weight around the middle that comes on. And it's a precursor to diabetes. And so we want to make sure that we're aware of watching our sugars, getting our good sleep so we don't crave sugars early on, because insulin resistance can start, or metabolic syndrome can start 15 to 17 years actually before you get diabetes. So if we can control things earlier, then we have a better chance of preventing diabetes. And along with metabolic syndrome, you can have low HDL, which is termed the good cholesterol. You can have the visceral or waist obesity. You can have high triglycerides that come from bad fats, so fatty foods that are fried, and increased triglycerides. And then hypertension or high blood pressure is part of that also. So sometimes just a positive thought first thing in the morning can change how your day is going to go. So I try to think of people and send people some morning devotions and different things so that I can get off on a good start. So now we're going to go through different body parts. And I'm not going to read you every slide. I want to just give you an idea of what you might be going through and didn't realize that stress was your starter point. So nervous system is the first one that we're going to talk about. Thanks. Okay, so the nervous system has a lot of different things that go along. So it can be the anxiety, which can cause a rapid heart rate. It can raise blood pressure. So sometimes people end up taking blood pressure medicines. It can give you IBS. So the brain and the gut are connected. And so that's where the digestive system effects from stress come from. And it can raise your blood sugars, which then increases your risk of diabetes. The muscular system. So when we're under stress and our adrenals, which are our stress glands, are overworking, then we get those tense muscles, and that's where the magnesium can come into play also. So, but you'll get muscle pains, headaches, migraines, all different kinds of things that can be related to the stress. So headaches can come from the neck tension that people can get, or it can come from being depleted in certain nutrients, not getting good sleep, those kinds of things. Next will be the respiratory system. Oh, sorry, Jenny, back. When you're under stress, then sometimes you can have shortness of breath, or if somebody has asthmatic issues. There we go, respiratory system. So you can hyperventilate, you can have panic attacks, or you can have asthma attacks even. Okay. So the cardiovascular system. So acute stress is definitely going to increase your cortisol. So the increasing the cortisol will put you at that higher heart rate. The blood vessels are going to increase risk of the hypertension or blood pressure. And you can, in certain instances, especially if the stress is in somebody who has underlying family history of heart or other things, could lead to a heart attack. And sometimes heart attacks or the symptoms from the heart attack will look the same as muscle spasms in the back. For women, that's common, or for men, it can feel like reflux. So you have to be really careful about your heart and make sure that you're getting regular checkups, know what risks are, and be aware of them. So the adrenals, I talked about it just a little bit. The adrenals sit over our kidneys in the back. So sometimes people will say that they have this back pain, and they check it out with the doctor, and the orthopedic doesn't know what's going on. That can actually be your adrenals actually overstressed or overworking, and you can feel that pain. So I'd even been taught by a woman who does touch therapy that you can just hold your adrenals for 60 seconds in the mornings or before you go to bed and kind of give them a little natural massage that can help them to recover and to work more appropriately. The stress hormones are actually made in the adrenal glands. So your cortisol, your epinephrine, those come from the adrenal gland. And then your liver works in conjunction with the adrenal gland, and it can, with cortisol being produced, then it will turn around and actually make more sugar. And so you get this up and down of the fight and flight emergency with the rapid heart rate, and then the sugar goes up, and you can then have extra, ups and downs of your sugars, which can cause headaches and cause dizziness and the whole gamut of things when you get into almost like a panic attack. So the GI system is the stomach, it's the colon, it's even the esophagus. So when somebody's having a lot of stress, if they're getting reflux, there's certain foods that are going to make that reflux worse. The butterflies in your stomach can actually be related to serotonin. I know a lot of people have heard of serotonin because of antidepressants, but butterflies is actually your stomach trying to turn on your serotonin. So there's this huge brain-gut connection. Stress can make people vomit. Stress can cause the IBS type symptoms, or the opposite. Sometimes it shuts your gut down and you'll get constipated. So don't ignore your stomach as being related to your stress. And then I did talk about stress and leaky gut. So some people will say, I ate the same foods, I can eat everything, and now I can't eat anything. What's going on? And I'll talk to them about leaky gut and the fact that that stress opens up the cells in our stomach, and then you can get nutrients from your stomach into your bloodstream, and that can cause a body reaction. And some people will get thyroid disease that's called autoimmune thyroid disease, or they'll get other autoimmune diseases, and it comes from the toxins or just foods getting into your bloodstream and your body trying to attack it. So we want to always try to calm down leaky gut. Our reproductive system. So when men are in extra stress, then their testosterone and their sperm counts won't be as abundant. And so there can be some infertility with the men from stress, and women will get abnormal periods, either having them every 2 weeks or they'll be absent altogether. And so that can decrease fertility, or it can just decrease your overall energy, sex drive, all of those different things that are related to hormones and hormone cycles. Even some people could go into an early menopause because of stress. So it's not always the load that breaks us, but it's how we carry it, or how we are supported even, by other people. So make sure that you lean on family and friends when you're in these chronic stressors so that you can be supported and help through them. So more about adrenal fatigue. So when you're in the high stress early time of the stress, then our cortisol goes way up. But after you've been dealing with the stress, typically it's in the year, 2 years and on, your adrenal system will slow down and you can go into what we call adrenal fatigue. Now, a lot of doctors don't believe in adrenal fatigue. They say you either have no adrenals or no cortisol in your system, and that's a serious, life-threatening, or you have super high cortisol in your system that is usually produced by tumors or different things going on. And they just look at those two extremes, and they don't look at the middle where the cortisol is just not in abundance enough to help you function and utilize the cortisol in your daily life. So when I'm doing saliva testing for people, they'll do like flat line cortisols when they're in adrenal fatigue throughout the day, because we'll do like a 4 time during the day cortisol test, and we'll be able to see how that goes over time. Sometimes early on, it'll be up and down during the day with the cortisols, and then later it's just flat. And we know that we need to support that with nutrients. A woman today, she was saying that she had the adrenal fatigue looking spectrum, and we were talking, and she said that she had to drink her coffee first thing in the morning or else she couldn't get going. And that's a sign a lot of times that you've got some adrenal issues, is when you can't get out of bed without your coffee, because your coffee has turned into your crutch because your adrenals aren't producing enough of the cortisol on their own. Oh, I think this is a little bit more about just where the adrenals are. So that's something that you guys will just have extra support to read back on this slide later. Next slide. So I found a website, and I have references in a couple different places for it. And they were talking about stress and cortisol in our immune system. So I kind of talked to you about our immune system being decreased. The cytokine storm is an inflammatory, or cytokines are an inflammatory marker. And people heard that cytokines term during COVID early on, where you can have cytokine storm and have huge amounts of inflammation. And stress does that. Also, the poor sleep cycles can cause that issue also. This is just another slide for talking about getting good sleep, getting laughing harder, loving better. So this is kind of the whole key to the talk, is caregiver burnout. So when you're either, even you can have husband and wife both be in caregiver burnout, or one might have it at some point and they're supporting the other, and then you go the other direction. But physically exhausted, mentally exhausted, you can feel undervalued, underappreciated. So you really need to find support from counselors when you're feeling like this, so that they can help you work through some of these things, try to problem solve with you on how you can get extra support, either for your child with the special needs or with your own support system. So the signs of the caregiver burnout: feelings of indifference or inability to provide yourself the standard of care, anger, resentment, changes in the sleep pattern we talked about, loss of appetite or too much eating, overeating, headaches, the joints, and the muscle pain. So kind of the things we've already gone over are all signs of caregiver burnout. Some more: the immunity, feelings of helplessness and despair, guilt and shame, social isolation, and unfortunately, sometimes alcohol and drug abuse come into that too. So how to beat the caregiver burnout? You want to be able to speak up and talk to people, get the help you need, accept the help, and then find rest and respite. Seeking the professional help, like I said earlier, and then nourishing and being nurtured also. Sometimes supplements can help that. That's what we were talking about a little bit before. Eating a good diet, trying to stay healthy eating. It's going to be beneficial for you, but also for your children as well. So this is just another slide about laughing and all the different things that laughing can do. So sometimes, people get into an almost an awkward laugh because their body is crying out for laughter and they don't even know why they're laughing. But it definitely helps the system, relaxes muscles, increases endorphins, which helps with energy and mental alertness, gives you more oxygen. So laughing's important. Here's the reference articles on the burnout. So there's also different, let me start over, sorry. There can be two people and they can go through the same types of stress, but they handle it differently. And people don't always know why they handle it better than another person, or why they just have, this horrible time handling a stress. And it can be found in our genes sometimes genetically. And so for some people, going and getting genetic testing done might give them answers to why they're handling the stress differently than someone else. So this company called 3x4 Genetics is a company I'm working with and finding ways to help people understand their body's mechanisms. So inflammation. Some people have genetics that are going to cause more inflammation than another person. And so that can be a difference. Or detoxification. If your system isn't detoxing properly, then you can have more headaches or you can have more hormone issues. And so that's another place that we see impact from why people respond differently. So this is, I've already talked about the detoxification and the inflammation. Oxidative stress is a term that people don't understand necessarily or have been aware of, but it means that your body's stressing on the inside. So somebody might look totally fine, but they get an ulcer. Well, that is potentially because their genetics are showing up in an oxidative stress pathway, and they get more, they call it rusting from the inside. It's kind of an odd term, but that's that stress. So antioxidants are lots of dark greens and vegetables, omega-3 fish oils, vitamin C is an antioxidant, CoQ10 is an antioxidant. So sometimes when that oxidative stress pathway is high, we know what kinds of supports that we can give them nutritionally or supplemental. And then hormone responses. So genetically, if you have hormones that aren't working properly in terms of detoxification or over making of certain hormones, then that's going to show up also. And this was just a slide that I pulled from my genetic company's website that shows that sometimes people will have a low impact from a gene and they might have a little bit of a glitch, but it's not going to slow them down. And as you get into the medium high and then very high on a gene, you have the potential to have a total roadblock in that gene, and your body's going to have to work a different way to get the same response. So another reason for showing the genetics that way is that you might have a child who has a major genetic issue, but they also might have gotten from family genetics the detoxification problem. And so it will compound their disability by having the genetics. So you might be able to see ways of supporting the child through knowing their genetics also. So it can be important to have the parents' genetics tested for themselves and support to the burnout and the different diseases that go with stress, but also in how we can support children with disabilities and rare diseases and why they react the way they do to different things. So this is just an extra slide that I found that I just felt was important to remember when it comes to God's help if you believe in God. Extra physical signs of stress. We've talked about most of these already, but stress can decrease testosterone levels on its own. So a drop in sex drive can come from stress. More colds and infections. Teeth grinding is one that people will get because of stress, and then they end up with muscle aches and headaches and tension also. Mind and mood. I think most of these we've had listed on another slide also. Lack of motivation can be adrenals. Increased nail biting. Social withdrawal is something that I've seen before also in all different kinds of stress. They'll just rather be alone. Actually, a lot of people with COVID have said that they're much happier working from home because they don't have to deal with that, the social interactions. But not getting interaction with people is not healthy. And let your body do the work for you. Give it nutrients to help you correct your stress or modify your stress. Here's some more resources for you also on your slides. So you'll be getting a copy of the PowerPoint so that you can have these resources. One thing I forgot to do is to put my email on the slides. So if you want to write down my email, it's medicpharmacy, all spelled out, at sbcglobal.net. So if you have any specific questions that you want to ask me, you're more than welcome to send me an email. If it's something short that I can respond or give you some direction to go, I'd be glad to do that.
Are there any questions that you'd like to ask?
We can answer some questions here for a few minutes.
You know, Mary Jane, I'll ask one question. I'm just curious that with age, does the age kind of play a role in some of the inflammation and different things that you talked about today?
It does. I mean, for a couple different reasons. One, just as we age and we've gone through menopause or perimenopause, or just as we get older, inflammation, all those things can make it worse.
Are there any certain supplements that are specifically really good for inflammation?
Inflammation, I mean, there's several different things to do for inflammation. One would be eating a non-inflammatory diet. So cutting back on sugar, not eating a lot of the grains or the, like potatoes, those kinds of things are inflammatory. Turmeric is good for inflammation. Ginger is good for inflammation. So there's different herbs that can be used. But turmeric is my favorite anti-inflammatory supplement.
We have a question in the chat about what should they look for as far as inflammation in children.
So dependent on the child, I mean, you can have inflammation and it can be causing joint pain, or it can be inflaming the brain, and you can have more issues there, or increased infections, because when you have more inflammation, more sugar, then that can be an issue. So it kind of depends on what their disability or their health condition is, to where it's going to show itself. Even eczema is an inflammatory condition of the skin. So it can show itself in different places.
Okay. We don't have any additional questions in the chat. Oh, there's one that just came in. Do you have approximate statistics for chronic stress and the prevalence for the prevalence of receiving an autoimmune diagnosis? Can she hear that, Joni?
I did hear that.
Okay,
There again, it's going to have to do with somebody's genetics, what their lifestyle is. But the stressors can be that last tipping point sometimes on them getting the autoimmune disease. So sometimes it's mom already has rheumatoid arthritis, and so we just think we're doomed to it. But the stressors, like if you have two sisters and mom has autoimmune disease and one gets it and one doesn't, then a lot of times that's, where their stress has come from.
we have another question.
No statistics specifically, though.
We do have another question. Could a child's diet affect their behavior?
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, you can have red dyes or other colored dyes affect their behavior. Sugar in general can affect their behavior. Even just low protein can affect behavior. Bad fats versus good fats. So diet is absolutely huge in what's going on with the child. Sleep can affect children's behavior.
We have another question here from Carrie. She says, my son has been having terrible stomach issues since he was an infant and we cannot get answers. Could inflammation be the cause? I have RA and didn't know if that would be something he would have to fight. I've had same issues when I was young.
So it could, it's not that he would necessarily get RA. He might as he gets older, but it could be that he has a leaky gut, and then that leaky gut is causing problems. And he might get, like I said earlier, eczema first, or he might have even leaky gut and leaky brain are connected. So sometimes there's eating the sugar and then the brain gets inflamed. And we have, as we get older, Alzheimer's is related to leaky brain, and type 3 diabetes, they've called it, because it's inflammation from sugar. So it's not only RA, but it could be something else for them that shows itself. Thyroid disease, there's autoimmune thyroid disease, and it's not diagnosed in children very often, but it's definitely a possibility. And I think it's kind of ignored and not delved into as often as it should be. I know a woman whose son is in his teenage years, and he's already been diagnosed with thyroid because she was aware of symptoms and got him tested because she had thyroid disease. So there's definitely some connections to that.
I think we have time for just 2 more questions, and I have those here. Once the stressors are removed, will your body go back to normal function?
When you have chronic stress and then it turning into adrenal fatigue, once it's been kind of supported with physician support or nutritional support, the physicians say it usually takes about 2 to 3 years to repair your adrenal system. So yes, you can get back to a healthier support, and dependent on, your underlying genetics. If you've gotten an autoimmune disease because of the stressor, you might be able to support it with the adrenals being better, but you might still have the autoimmune disease, but you can put autoimmune diseases into remission. So definitely support and nutrition is going to help get you on the road to recovery.
Is there an age that seems to be the most impactful negatively regarding autoimmune diseases and chronic stress?
In terms of the children or adults?
They did not specify.
Okay.
Speak to maybe both?
So women, I would say, when you're going through menopause and your hormones are starting to go haywire, then getting autoimmune diseases seems to be heightened. Vitamin D is really important when it comes to autoimmune diseases also. So if mom and child are in the house all the time because of the type of health conditions that the child has, then that's going to put mom at a higher risk of getting the autoimmune diseases potentially earlier because they haven't had that vitamin D sun support. So taking supplements of vitamin D is going to help them. So that would be one. Teenage years, when kids are going through puberty, that would be another time that their hormones are wacky, and so the body stressors would be higher. If somebody has like stacking on top things, so if they have allergies and then they have a tornado at their house and then they have an autoimmune disease, or they have just their regular disability, all of that stacking on top of each other will make it worse. So I know when my son was in the NICU, when barometric pressures came on, then his body, was in more stress, and they could see that respiratory wise and oxygen counts and things like that. So for that whole stacking effect, is going to make things worse.
Okay, so it looks like, for instance, if a child has chronic stress at a young age, are they more likely to get a diagnosis later on?
So it depends on what their chronic stress was from and how they cope with the chronic stress. But a diagnosis, is she talking diagnosis of autoimmune disease or just anything later on?
I'm not sure. She did not specify.
She's not sure.
Okay. So,
Can you hear me?
if you've got the chronic stress and you're eating poorly and your blood sugar's up, then the risk of getting diabetes is going to be higher. right off the bat. Heart disease, hypertension. If you're prone family-wise of hypertension with salt, then that's going to compound it, and you can get, heart disease quicker or sooner. So it's all compounded with, what's going on. It's hard to say. That's why not every child ends up with chronic diseases, even though they might have a disability. Actually, I did genetics on a teenager who has a rare disorder, but she has longevity in her genes, and her immunity was good in her genes, and so she never gets sick. She also genetically had the ability to strong endurance with exercise. So the fact that she can exercise a lot is actually really good for her, because it's going to keep her moving and emotionally stronger and things like that. So that's where what's going on genetically really could make a difference. And diet-wise, if you get two children with the same disability, and actually, let me go differently. I know some moms who needed to be gluten-free for themselves, and so their child was gluten-free, and she has Down syndrome. But she is this very tiny, beautiful young lady who doesn't have a weight issue with her Down syndrome. And I totally give it to her mom, because they don't eat gluten. They don't have that inflammation that goes along with gluten. So even though the daughter wasn't originally supposed to be gluten-free for her own health, it turned out to be a benefit. So I think that diet can change the dynamics of the disease along with the other. So when it comes to stress in a family situation, either a death in the family or separation or divorce of the parent, you can definitely have increased risks of the autoimmune diseases. An example that's not related to a child with a disability, but I know somebody who was super high stress with her work environment and had a family history of autoimmune diseases, and she ended up with an autoimmune disease. And I truly believe it was from her stressors from work environment that played with that. So yes, any of those stressors, and like I said before, compounding those stressors. So if you are going through menopause and you get divorced, and then your parent passes away, then that just beats and beats on that adrenal system to where you're going to crash at some point. And that's going to lead to those autoimmune diseases being heightened or have that propensity towards them.
Okay. We are so glad that you have been able to join us at this conference, and we do appreciate you sticking with us, even though we started a little bit late. We do have one evaluation for the entire conference that we would love for you to be able to complete. I do know that Wanda Felty, if you attend one of her sessions, has an additional evaluation that we would love for you to get all that information to her too. At this time, I think we want to thank Mary Jane for this wonderful information. I know I have sat here and taken lots of notes thinking that I just needed just about everything that she said. So again, it has definitely been well worth our time, and we are so glad. Lots of comments in the chat about great information. So Mary Jane, thank you so much. It's been so great to have you with us.